telling it the way it is.
Ready. I'll call this January 24th, 2022 meeting of the Carroll County Board of Supervisors to order. At this time, I'd ask Mr. Collins if he'd lead us in the invocation and pledge.
Father, thank you for this opportunity to be together to work this budget session. Pray that you be with us, give us leadership and guidance. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the first thing on the agenda is the registrar presentation by Kimberly Cloud.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I brought you a packet with a bunch of information. And Brandon, I'm going to put the map on the screen for us. The legal size sheet that you have in front of you has the expense of one election. I divided it into 17 precincts, 10 precincts, and 5 precincts. I also listed the number of elections that we would have within a fiscal year. In 2023 fiscal year, we'll have 2 elections. 2024, we'll have 2 or 3 elections. That would be determined if we have a June primary. And in 2025, we'll have 2 elections. So the total figure on the right at the bottom is your cost per election based on the number of precincts you have. Any questions about that? Okay. I've also listed the advantages of reducing the number of precincts. First off, the town of Hillsville election has been moved to November. The General Assembly put that into law. So where the town had their own election in May, there may be some figuring need to be done to determine how much the town will pay for their expenses in a November election. We also can reduce the number of officers that we have to have at precincts if we reduce the number. It is very difficult to find anyone willing to work on election day, anyone that is responsible and dedicated. So that is a big factor when our electoral board starts recruiting officers of election. Also, our custodian expense would be reduced. Our pre-election testing hours would be reduced. Programming expenses would be reduced. Maintenance, the county maintenance helps us on the day before election and the day after by delivering voting equipment. Also, the day after election, they have to go back out and retrieve that equipment. With our 17 precincts now, it takes 2 teams all day to deliver, and then the same 2 teams to pick up the equipment the day after election. That also means we have to rent 2 trailers. Maintenance, they have to also mark the 40-foot boundary. And then Woodlawn has become sort of a sore spot for us. So that needs cleaning if we still vote at Woodlawn. Our office supplies, this is copies, staples, paper clips. Because we have 17 precincts, there are a lot of forms that we use on election day. We have to copy everything 17 times. If we reduce down to 10 or 5 precincts, we would only have to do it 10 or 5 times. If we reduce down to 5 precincts, we would have no building rent. We pay rent for Silvatus, Duxborough, and Vaughn at this time, $75. It's not much, but it does add up. Also, the miles traveled by the electoral board on election day, they are continuously traveling from one precinct to another, seeing if there are any issues, any problems that need their attention. So they would only have to travel to a smaller number of precincts rather than travel throughout the county if we go down, if we still have 17 precincts. Also, our electronic poll book, at this point in time with 17 precincts, we have to program, test about 40 laptops. That takes more time. If we reduce the number of precincts, we could reduce the number of laptops that we have to program. Also, some precinct locations are not in very good condition. They're difficult for handicap. For instance, in our Vaughn precinct, the chief officer has to go outside the metal building to call us because cell phone signal does not come through. Same problem at Sylvatus and Lambsburg. We have a very difficult time on election day having contact with those people because the cell phone service is so poor. Two things will not change if you reduce the number of precincts. We would still need election day support from our machine company. Also, the number of voters does not change. Therefore, we will still print the same number of ballots for every election. The main disadvantage is that voters, if we go down to 5 precincts, which is what the electoral board recommends, 1 precinct per district, voters will only have 1 place to go vote on election day. But as you know, the past 2 elections, we've had early voting, early in-person voting, and by mail voting. This past November, we had a 57% turnout. We had 30% that voted early and by mail. So it was half of the people that voted this past November voted early in our office downstairs or by mail. We also noted that a lot of people were coming in to pay their taxes, and they just decided they would come and vote when they were paying their taxes. So it was a benefit for those people. We are on a strict timeline for deciding about redistricting. We have a June primary. Early voting for that primary will begin May the 6th. We have to notify voters 15 days in advance if their precinct changes. So we're looking at needing to know what our precincts are no later than sometime in March, because it will take some time to get all the logistics completed and get people moved. We'll have to mail almost 21,000 voter notices, 1 for every registered voter in the county, and that will take time. As you know, you have to advertise for 2 consecutive weeks. If you make changes, you also have to have a public hearing. So we are on a strict timeline in order to get this implemented before the June primary. If we reduce the number of precincts, that's the only way the electoral board and the registrar can reduce their budget. We do not make money in the registrar's office. We only spend money, and we seem to spend a lot of it. You will have to purchase new voting equipment, probably within the next 5 years. Right now, we have 21 machines for 17 precincts. You could reduce that by almost half if you go down to 5 precincts. So you could spend $300,000 or $150,000 on voting equipment. Same thing with electronic poll books. By July the 1st of this year, we have to have a new poll book solution. We have to have new poll books, new software, new hardware. We can spend $100,000 for 17 precincts or reduce that number and spend less money. But one thing's for sure, the legislature will continue to pass down mandates to the localities, and we never know what that will be. Expenses will continue to rise for elections. the legislature passes things down to the locality in other areas as well, and we have to fund them. I've given you a sheet that shows registered voters by precinct, and then I handwritten in the total of registered voters by district so you can have some idea. Also, the town of Hillsville, again, they have a little over 1,800 registered voters. There is a sheet in there that recommends lists the 5 precincts recommended by the electoral board. They are recommending to reduce each district to 1 precinct and have 5 locations to vote. Fancy Gap would vote at St. Paul, Laurel Fork at the high school, Pine Creek would vote at the middle school, Piper's Gap at Oakland, and Sulphur Springs at Gladeville. Because the town of Hillsville has been moved to November, we will have to make some adjustments. You can see on the screen the pink lines for the town boundaries. We're going to have, it's going to be a little more complicated than it's been in the past because you will have town voters and county voters on election day. In the past, town voters went to the VFW and voted for town in May, and then they had their county election in November. Now they will go to one place and vote a ballot that has their town candidates as well as their county and state candidates on it. So it will take some thinking, making sure we get everybody in the right place. But the board does recommend that you go down to 5 precincts, 1 per district. Questions?
Tim, where's the sheet that shows the 5 districts?
This is a list.
I saw that.
Yeah, that just lists
That shows
currently, and then at the end it says they would become, for instance, the first one would combine to become the Fancy Gap precinct and the Fancy Gap district. One thing, because the county is now wholly in a House district and wholly in a Senate district, we will lose 1 precinct, and that's the small precinct in Piper's Gap between Glendale Road and 58. And I'll show that to you. The county was split by Senate. This part between Glendale and 58 was in the 19th Senate. The rest of Piper's Gap was in the 20th. Now the county is in 1 district, so we will move this precinct back into Woodlawn D, and we will be down to 16. Because it no longer needs to be separated. It was originally in Woodlawn D before the county was split into 2 Senate districts, so we're bringing that back in, or recommending to bring that back in where it was originally.
And that would drop it to 16.
16, yes. Right now, did we have 85 officers of election? 85 officers of election last November, and you're looking at about 50 officers of election needed if you drop down to 5 precincts. In-person early voting and mail voting continues to go up. I think North Carolina's been doing it for over 10 years, maybe close to 20 years. The percentage of early voters they have for any election is 60%. So fewer and fewer people are voting on election day and taking advantage of early in-person.
What you were discussing, that is considered Woodlawn F, right?
I'm sorry, what?
Woodlawn F would be the precinct that goes to
Right,
Woodlawn
that would
D.
go back into Woodlawn D. That's where it was originally 10 years ago in '01.
Would that eliminate a voting place?
No,
Just a precinct?
if it stays the way it is, those people would still go to Woodlawn to vote.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Thanks, Ms. Clown.
You're welcome.
Next on the agenda is Twin County 911. Darlene Young.
I might have accidentally told her 6 o'clock, so
Okay, we'll move on, and then if she gets here. All right, next, emergency services presentation, Gary Bergeron.
thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Gary.
I think I have more notes than I do actual presentation. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to come and share kind of some of the planning and also the thought process behind the budget request and some of our endeavors moving forward. What you have is just an outline version of this PowerPoint. That's just to save on several of the graphs. And then on the back side is a coverage map. That's the operational map that's in my office. And we will come to it here in just a second. Which one do I point to? It's on. Yes, sir. As far as I know. Sorry? Other than when we were the other day, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
We're good. Thank you. So what I'd like to share with you is just a basic overview of what Carroll County Emergency Services actually is. And then share our administration and operations and take a look at our current budget request and have that supported with our call data for 2020 and 2021. And then go into some goals and long-range planning at no more than a 5-year view, just where we are and what our goals with the paid agency and the volunteer departments to get all of emergency services moving in a unified and forward direction, and then review this data and have any questions from you all. So going back through the paperwork, that the heading for any documentation has been addressed as Carroll County Emergency Services Fire and Rescue, all encompassing. We are an overall joint department, between career staff and volunteer agencies, 3 volunteer fire departments. We do have 3 volunteer rescue squads, one of which right now is kind of in an inactive status. Carroll County Fire and Rescue, your career side, was established by the county in 2006. That is your career firefighter and EMS providers, which is staffed 24/7. We currently have 21 full-time personnel, 9 part-time, and our administrative staff is a chief, assistant chief, and an admin specialist. Your Department of Emergency Management also historically has operated out of this department. That is myself, the county's emergency services coordinator, and we have our assistant chief of EMS operations, who is also serving as the deputy emergency services coordinator, as designated or on an on-call status. And then our county volunteer fire departments, or excuse me, all volunteer departments, have had the continual operation as Carroll County Emergency Services. It is that unified effort that I talked about, trying to get everyone addressing it as how do we better serve all of our communities together. And that's looking at the preservation of life and property, disaster preparedness, and then obviously response and recovery. So our local volunteer departments, Cana Volunteer Fire Department, Hillsville Volunteer Fire Department, Laurel Fork, and then we have Laurel Fork Volunteer Rescue, Piper's Gap Volunteer Rescue, and Laurel Rescue. As of right now, Laurel Fork Volunteer Rescue, per the direction of our operational medical director, Dr. Edsel, has been written out of the 911 response plan. They are not closed down. They're not anything other than it's supposed to be a time for them to go back administratively, recruitment and retention, how to address their call volume. But since 2020, actually probably the better part of 2019 to the present, Carroll Fire and Rescue has picked up the primary response area for what we call Area 5 or Laurel Fork. Their membership is very low, and their squad activity has been very minimal. So that's they are still an entity, but they've been currently written out of the response plan for reconstruction, if you will, within their department. Our budget, based with statistics and operations, we operate under a combined budget, so we have these sub-departments for emergency services, volunteer rescue, volunteer fire, and then Carroll County Fire and Rescue. So our request is then based basically on these 4 individual departments and their operations. For fiscal year 2022, you'll see to the left right there, Carroll Fire Rescue has the largest portion of the operational budget, and that's simply because of the wages, salaries that go into having full-time staff. Aside from that, our operational costs with medical supplies, fuel, insurance, pretty much mirrors what you have in volunteer fire rescue and the emergency services department. Comparatively, our request for 2023 is pretty much similar data. What you're seeing in the to the right-hand side of the pie chart is slight variation in the numbers coming out of volunteer fire departments. And in my request, what I've done is taken that larger training portion. We're able to satisfy several class and equipment needs on the volunteer side. So I requested to redistribute that training money now to have it equal across the board. 15,000 in volunteer fire, 15,000 in volunteer rescue. And then I put 20 down into emergency services as a blanket request, because that's also training and equipment. So if there's hazmat supplies, or any other need that could facilitate either one of the volunteer groups, we still have that line item to pull from. So we just redistributed that prior request. This data right here, what it's showing is kind of what's spread across all 4 of those sub-departments. county money, if you will, that goes towards the line of duty death or the loader rosters, and that's on all personnel, career and volunteer. Then we have insurance on the vehicles, workman's comp on personnel. The state funds, which is the largest portion of that. Aid to localities money is what's offered through the fire side, through Department of Fire programs. And then you have the Four for Life funds, which is state funding per the EMS side. And these are all funds that come directly to the county level. And we divide those funds amongst the volunteer departments based on an even division. 10% will go to Carroll Fire Rescue, and then that 90 is split 45 and 45, and then it's divided out, and the other 45% is in based on call volume. But those are, that's money that goes to them for equipment and or training needs. There is specific criteria for that state level grant that they have to spend that on. But that is going towards their operational budgets. And then you see medical supplies. Several cycles back, medical supplies was taken out of the volunteer rescue side and put into Carroll Fire Rescue's operational budget. That is, they found it easier to single source out of our stockroom. So we buy medical supplies for all the county medic trucks. And in my budget request, there is an increase simply due to what's reflected in the industry right now. If you want to, it's the inflation of the product, whether it's supply chain or what have you, but we're seeing that with all equipment across the board. Hand tools, apparatus, medical supplies, turnout gear. Looking at our volunteer numbers in a 5-year trend, starting back in 2017, there was an overall decrease by volunteer fire and EMS, a drop of 35, a count of 35 people in the loader roster. So moving up to 2021, you can see the trend has been mainly on the EMS side there in blue. And we seem to have plateaued in the last two or 3 years. We dropped 3, dropped 9, picked 3 back up on the 2021 loader roster. We do not have all of 22 in yet. I would dare say, looking at what I have so far, it's closely mimicking the 2021 data. Floating right around a loss or a gain of 1 or 2, right there, that 3 mark as far as that plateauing trend. Unfortunately, on the EMS side especially, the past 2 years in the COVID environment has been very taxing on providers, both paid and volunteer. We are addressing 3 openings full-time in our staffing needs, and we've been addressing those consistently since I came on in July of 2020. But our neighboring departments and other localities are facing that same staffing issue, and it's been largely equated to, for lack of a better word, just burnout in the COVID environment. That continuous call, that obviously has been one of our major chief complaints. On the fire side, not so much. Those numbers have tended to hold steady over this time period. But the only restricting action that I've heard, and there again, this has been widely expressed, is the training requirements for volunteer firefighters. Not so much what a department's bylaws are requiring is just the travel time. When I went through my fire 1 and 2, I was fortunate to be at my home department. I was at Radford at the time in college, so I was back and forth. But lately, fire programs, it seems the state stops somewhere at Roanoke. And that's been with a whole lot of state-level programs. So that was part of our ask in last year's volunteer fire department training budget. And that class will start for us February 4th. So we're going to do an in-county firefighter 1, 2, and hazmat operations to try to address that training need, but also allow them to be in their backyard, so to speak, and not traveling out. Piper's Gap has an EMT class starting up at that same time frame. So we're also working to try to keep that level of training in county for their CE hours as well. And hopefully, as we turn out trained and qualified candidates, we can retain them. Because unfortunately, Carroll has lost a lot of good provider talent to other localities. And I think it's a shame. That's how I address when we look at our competitive pay, that other localities benefit from people who call Carroll home, stay here but work somewhere else. And that it's one of our goals is to try to recruit and retain those people. So, I apologize for kind of how busy these graphs are. On the left-hand side, the EMS calls, that's looking at, starting at the total for the county, and then you see what Carroll Fire Rescue's been dispatched to, and that's to include Carroll Fire Rescue assisting the volunteer agencies, and then the third blue column is our run data. So comparatively, our yearly call volume closely mimics the total county call volume. To the right, you'll see the total volunteer calls that were dispatched. That dual response in red, that's what Carroll Fire Rescue has either assisted our volunteer departments with, or the calls we just picked up for them. And then that third blue column is calls that they answered on in their own jurisdiction or coverage area. This data is what's submitted monthly and then year-end by Misty, our admin specialist. This reflects the 911 data that Jolena gives us. Same thing looking at fire calls for 2020. The first blue is the total dispatch, and then the subsequent colors, structure fires, vehicle fires, brush fires, motor vehicle accidents, and then other calls for service. So those all complement that first column. And in 2020, there were 666 fire calls. That's a busy volunteer fire complement as far as answering those calls. Carroll Fire Rescue is also dispatched or dual toned. Every time fire tones go off in the county, we are dual toned also. So as a career agency, we're picking up our regular EMS medical call volume plus that 666 additional fire calls as well. That's what this graph addresses. Total fire calls 666, and you can see what was answered by Cana, Laurel Fork, and Hillsville. And then because we are dual toned and we do respond, we have trucks on the scene, we absorb that call volume as well. Here's the same data for 2021. As of today, we have not received the reporting from Jolena for November or December, so we can close our year out statistically, but it's addressing the same aspects. Total county dispatch, what Carroll Fire Rescue picks up with our own calls plus assisting the volunteers, and then you see the volunteer data on the right. Our dual dispatch with them, and then the calls that they've answered on their own. 2021 data for fire calls up until October. The same complement, structure fire, vehicle, brush, etc. Going into the total call volume. And there again, because we are dual tone, we absorb the fire calls in our response as well. So, breaking that data down, for 2020, if you average it out, that's roughly 58 calls per month that our volunteers weren't able to answer. Now, that being said, that's just an honest statement. I mean, they're volunteers, they work out of the area. There are days when their on-call calendar is not staffed, or they might have already been out on one call, didn't have a second crew. There's several factors in there, so I'm not trying to make a negative statement towards them by any means. In 2021, it's 76 calls per month. And these are the calls that we have covered. In addition, to our initial call volume. Right there in parentheses, the data is not shown. There's roughly 5% that when we are on calls, or we do have 3 staffing vacancies right now. So roughly 5% in a year's time, the volunteers do pick up our call volume. So we work hand in hand. And the other important thing to note with those numbers, Area 5 or the Laurel Fork coverage area, that primary volunteer agency, as I mentioned when I started, has been written out of the 911 response plan. But that call volume they're answering has decreased starting in 2019 dramatically. So that is going to add to what looks like a large number being unanswered by volunteers, because it's just a zero response coming out of that area. So it's not skewed, but there's a little more to that number of unanswered calls. And then, as I said, with the fire calls, you can see what was run in 2020 and 2021 by the volunteer fire departments, that breakdown of call volume. And that just reiterates our mission statement. Other than providing EMS services, we do arrive on scene with AirPac qualified personnel to provide suppression or any other type of operational support. All this to say, and this goes into addressing our competitive pay, which we did with the previous board, moving forward, and in our recruitment and retention, our call volume is drastically increasing on the career side. During the daytime hours, especially on the fire side, for Area 4 or Area 5, which is Cana and Laurel Fork, we have been primary for fire suppression. We've been asked to stop and get the fire apparatus out of those stations to get an engine or a brush truck on scene. It's part of the job, but more and more we're finding ourselves in that primary role before volunteer manpower gets on scene. And part of our future planning is if we're wanting to address that, we can meet that adequate response, but also keep our medic units in a quicker in-service time. And that's what gets us into our 5-year plan, in which, moving forward, in future budget requests, we will have to continue to address our competitive pay. Just this past year, we were able to up our salaries where we were finally competitive to the region. Before we made that move as a county, our firefighter EMS providers were below the bottom 5% in a national comparison. It was time to address that aspect of their job. So we want to focus on our recruitment and retention moving forward, and that's both for career and volunteer staffing. Our competitive pay, there are grant opportunities for recruitment and retention that we're going to look into and apply for when those cycles are open. And we also want to continue to market all facets of Carroll County Emergency Services. We were invited to and attended the career fair this past fall at Carroll County High School, and we went with the operational mindset to advertise both the career side and, hey, go knock on the door of your local volunteer department. We are not going to be able to continue the mission without having a strong volunteer complement. Nationwide, you're still looking at approximately 70% of your fire EMS providers working out of volunteer stations. So we want to do everything we can to help fortify that foundation that we have in our volunteers. With our efficient staffing and response, we want to continue to look at how we operate on the career side. I have it designated as areas 4, 6, and now 5. That's Cana. Area 6 is Dougspur. And Area 5, like I said, is Laurel Fork. Over the past several years, those volunteer EMS stations, for whatever reasons, prior to me being here, but closed down those services. So that's automatic call volume that we pick up. One of our goals is to have our Unit 1000 or ALS 1000, which is a quick response vehicle. We want to see it fully staffed and run it as a true squad concept. meaning that it is adequately staffed to have a medical response and a fire response. But we want to treat it as a first response or QRV, quick response vehicle, to remote locations to be able to assess patients more rapidly and or initiate ALS services. And we also want to be able to help the volunteers, especially during their peak daytime hours when their manpower is low, to be able to provide skilled firefighters, airpack certified, and supplement or support that fire operation. The ultimate goal, as it stands right now, when we commit any of our staff to a fire scene, the Hallett Street Fire, Drew Ridge, Old Race Inn, Sheriff Manning's Out 58, all those working fires, that medic truck gets on scene, they make the assessment, is there or is there not a patient need of any kind, and then they go to work. But that medic truck is committed to a fire attack in that fire scene for X amount of time. So the end goal is also to be able to get our medic trucks with a quicker turnaround or back in service sooner. On the back of your handout, I printed this copy. Like I said, this is the operational map of my office. As it stands right now, the red pegs, if you can discern those on your maps, we'll start right here. I think it's right there. It won't show up on that screen, really. Okay. The red peg in the center of the town of Hillsville, obviously that's Hillsville Fire Department. Then if you look up towards the Dougspur area, the upper right corner, that's Hillsville Station 3. You come right here, going towards the Laurel community out this way, out Airport Road, that's Hillsville Station 2. And then if you look, the blue pegs that go right here, that would be Laurel Rescue, Piper's Gap Station 1, Piper's Gap Station 2. The three red pegs down here along the bottom, those are Cana's stations 1, 2, and 3. That's out going towards Love's Truck Stop, obviously off of 52, and then over towards Ward's Gap. Right here in the kind of middle right hand side, the far red peg is Laurel Forks Fire Station, and then coming this moving to the left on 58, that's Laurel Fork Rescue. So as far as efficient coverage, we have a Cana truck that sits in area 4. If our trucks in town are both dispatched and answering calls, the Cana truck will move up to exit 8, and then they'll swing shift that coverage. And then when other trucks are back in service, they drop back down into the Cana station. The bulk of our call volume is what we call Area 2, and that's kind of Hillsville proper and just kind of a larger circle right around the town of Hillsville. Moving forward, if you can, the pegs that have the green dot underneath them, that's where we're wanting to look at future staging for other fire medic trucks. Like I said, in 2006, the county changed the mission of Carroll EMS and cross-trained them to be firefighter EMS providers. So we have the obligation to work on both sides of that coin. Right now, we're budgeted 24 positions. That would be 4 trucks per shift. We're operating with 21, and depending on, we're still going through quarantine time, other general sick call-outs. Our minimum staffing is 3 trucks, and we're doing everything every day to make sure we have 3 trucks. And that's to allow us the Cana truck, and then 2 in Hillsville proper that answers. Well, I wish this pointer was working. So right now, kind of the Chances Creek section, but from here all the way until you get on this side for Laurel's coverage, this is our primary EMS coverage every day. And then the days when either a crew is already on a call or they don't have a duty crew that day, we stand a chance of having the entire county with what's happening that we're working out right now. So future staffing is gonna be a necessity to be able to provide an adequate response and service to our citizens. So this is something that I study quite often. What's the best placement? How do we get there as far as to provide the sufficient and adequate coverage? We want to begin to address billing and recovery. Looking at our current structure of how billing services are offered, and then revisit that in the future. Is there a more efficient process? Is there a more efficient company to use? We just want to analyze that and make sure that we're getting the best return on that. As far as the emergency management side, the other 99% of my job, this past year, the county's emergency operations plan was just revised and approved. Hopefully, we are on the downhill side of all the COVID related issues, and I want to get the key stakeholders in place to review this plan. I ran into a few operational setbacks, and that is key players not realizing they're key players in that plan. It's something that's long been on the books for the county, and it just needs to have the dust blown off and truly exercised to find strengths and weaknesses. Also, the same thing with, I believe it was in 2011, the county had a mass casualty incident response plan for I-77. Definitely has to be revisited because two of the rescue squads that are on that plan no longer are in service. So we really got to address that. I want to see a storm ready status for Carroll County, and with that, look at severe weather alerting in lieu of what options we already have between Everbridge and or phone alerts. And then also just a continual working towards our preparedness and response. I want to address on the volunteer fire side, standard operating guidelines or procedures. And this is, the key word here is compliant and safe. We're working through some operational issues in some of our volunteer fire response. We have to make sure that, our volunteers, the key word there, they're giving their time. So we want to put things in place that they're protected and trained when they perform these duties. And also, it just fits. Our county EMS operates under a single operational medical director, Dr. Edson. We have one set of medical protocols. So emergency medicine is universal across the board, no matter what truck we have that's responding. So likewise, say take, for example, on-scene accountability for a fire. That's something I want to address. So whether we are pulling lines in Laurel Fork or in Cana, the general operations of that scene are the same. Accountability is one of the number one Mayday related issues in firefighter fatality, so that's something I'm looking to address. You all have probably been apprised of our county radio situation. I know we're part of a radio study and we're waiting on the RFP for proposals for that. My radio maintenance budget has maintained the same. It's in lieu of any funding that would go into rebuilding the system. When the system is repaired or replaced, however we move forward, the PM maintenance cost out of that should be sufficient, and hopefully that's all we'll need. We are in a dire situation for our radios. Just this afternoon, I got a call from a service tech, and we have a motor and microwave unit in the Laurel Fork tower location behind the Laurel Fork Fire Department that it's done. That affects the sheriff's office and our fire rescue channel. I'm waiting on an estimated cost, but the parts are so old that our first go-to is either eBay or we try to bridge that with modern and replaceable equipment. We've been looking at a damage repair report from a lightning strike in September. That's something we want to keep on the forefront. Our law enforcement, fire rescue, they have to be able to talk when they're in these remote corners of the county. The capital improvement plan, I submitted some, planning ideas to finance a while back. Part of that, for our volunteers is having turnout gear and SCBA or their air packs on a replacement plan. That's two of the most expensive pieces of equipment aside from their apparatus that a volunteer fire department could try to pay for. NFPA suggests 10 and 20 years on those items. I had suggested that we start looking at on a 5-year replacement. So when we hit a 5-year mark, we do X amount of sets. But if anything, that's always keeping compliant gear on our volunteer firefighters and career staffing. Heaven forbid the worst happens, that's something that's addressed by NIOSH or the other insurance investigated actions on a fire scene is the compliance of gear. But we also want to look at fire and EMS apparatus moving forward on an appropriate replacement plan. And then facilities. Currently, our emergency operations center is the squad room to the sheriff's office. The deputies have since put their partitions back up and they utilize that space. So, for example, if we had a mass shooting incident and we wanted to open the EOC for incoming units, triage, staging other medic units, so on and so forth, if I open that inside of the sheriff's office, the EOC operations is now competing with the sheriff's deputies trying to utilize their place for operations as well. So moving forward, we want to address the cost of trying to relocate that and also a place that has better radio and cell phone service. It's my understanding that when you get down into that squad room, having been down there for a few meetings, it's very limited. And during the time of an emergency disaster response, those are going to be key lines of communication. Also, in the next 5 years, to address the facilities for our career staff. You all know the building that we're in right now. We currently have one shower for 6 to 8 people on a shift at a time. And I raised the concern before that when they come in from this particular call was a body removal, several weeks deceased, and they all had to wait their turn to wash that off and launder, and we can do better than that. Because unfortunately, 2 of those responders had to go back out on a call, and during that time, yeah, they were able to change their uniforms, but you want to wash. You want to be able to decon, if you will, from a situation like that. So I would like to see in the 5-year planning, beginning to look at a new facility or station to house Carroll Fire and Rescue. To summarize all this, I have it down as being a dynamic county department with an inclusive operational budget. You've seen what overlays across all 4 sub-departments between LODA, insurance, and those things, the training budget. It's a continual effort to mesh so where you can't discern where a volunteer truck and a career truck begins or ends. We want to keep that working relationship and project our response, coverage, supporting actions, and operations in a forward-moving direction. As I mentioned, our FY23 increases, they were requested simply because of what's looking at the market. Inflation or anything related to the items that pertain to our specific industry. Fuel costs are going up, our utilities, same with residents, they tend to go up every year, so we've asked to increase that as well. Medical supplies, gear, and other equipment. Do you all have any questions for me?
I do.
Yes, sir.
Gary, thank you for the professional and informative presentation. It's excellent. Appreciate it very much. If you could talk a little bit more about your the pins with the green dots in Duxborough, Laurel Fork, and the airport.
Okay.
And also, I represent Laurel Fork, and obviously, we're in need of additional services. So whatever we can do to improve that would be great, because I tell you, it's about 18 to 20 miles from the eastern edge of my district to the high school.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty good haul.
So hopefully it's fairly clear on your all's picture. Here's our main station, and then we are down here in the old Canada Rescue Squad station. As I mentioned, this is where the Laurel Fork Volunteer Rescue Squad station is. During the height of COVID, when we were trying to accommodate all the restrictions, we kept our fourth truck housed out here at the Laurel Fork Fire Department. And that was just simply to meet all the social distancing. But that was also where the second largest need was. Nothing had taken place per Dr. Edsel with Laurel Fork Rescue yet. This is Hillsville Station 2, out Airport Road. And the reason why I've got that green dot behind it, since our stations are in green, moving forward, Piper's Gap Station, an active volunteer rescue squad. Laurel, an active volunteer rescue squad. Would we want to house a career truck between two active squads? Well, we do pick up those calls, and they picked up ours on occasion. But here, a building already exists. There's a need. It's a good location. They can come back to town on 58 to take 221 out, or if they need to, 638 to get into this area. Doug Spur is probably our lowest call volume, but there's an existing station out there. We could house inside Hillsville Station 3. So that's what that means, is these are already existing buildings. Could they be utilized as a strategic staging point or future station for fire medic trucks or the Carroll Fire Rescue personnel? Right here is exit 8, or just where used to be the old Pines and Needles. It's a variety shop or something now. So when these Area 2 trucks do get full, or they're on, both out on a call, this is the staging point that the Area 4, the Cana truck, comes to. That way they can come back down 52 if need be, or if it's on this side, they can hit the interstate and come right down and on exit 1. That would be an ideal location in the future as well. So that's I hope that's answering your question, just the thought process behind that.
So staging out of the rescue squad building for Laurel Fork, not on a permanent basis, but
Well,
as needed, or?
no, sir, this is looking at becoming permanent duty posts.
Okay.
So we're not having to make that 16.6 miles all the way to Laurel Meadows, from time beginning, you teach and you're taught you gotta be part of the solution and not the problem. And if these trucks are going beyond what they should, we don't wanna be part of an issue. We wanna get there to be able to provide the service. And that isn't always speeding down the road, but being stationed strategically to provide that adequate coverage. So that's how I had that laid out, just study that.
Can you do that now, or do you need additional manpower and do?
We need additional manpower moving forward.
Where was
Gary, you said was the ideal place down there in the Cana area.
Well, so this is the current Cana station for us.
Right.
Right now, if and when they do stand by up here, they're in that little gravel lot beside it. By ideal, you have quicker access, because right now, they have to come from here to either Flower Gap or Brushy Fork. It's doable, but depending on the weather, if we have some part-time from out of the area, they don't know that road. When I was doing building inspections, to me, the lesser of the two evils is always cutting off the Brushy Fork, old Piper's Gap and up. It just seemed like a friendlier road. And this isn't in lieu of this is in addition to, because coming out of here, this becomes our second busiest call volume for our primary response. and then shift towards Laurel Fork, and then, like I said, up into the Duxboro area. So this is not just future stages, but maybe we could have a substation in that location moving forward as well.
That also affords you to the Chances Creek area too,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes, sir, a lot faster than either direction.
Is most of your cost related to the interstate fires and vehicle accidents?
Primarily, we have had several diabetic, not breathing, possible OB-related things, but for the most part, just given the nature of that response area, vehicles, NBCs or fires, yes, sir. Obviously, your hazmat stuff as well.
Is there a big difference in the Piper's Gap as far as response from their original facility to their new facility, or are they covered about the same?
Being tucked over off of Glendale, as opposed to St. Louis Church.
No, they're the one on Elkhorn, yeah.
I haven't noticed anything, one way or the other. They have ample membership that kinda, it splits the difference.
Okay.
I do think they respond out of Station 2 more. But that's also looking at kind of the populated
Yeah.
response area.
And then across the river, I'm assuming that Ivanhoe covers that area? Out of Lithgow, yeah.
We do, in the volunteer fire department, it's labeled as all the other departments, and that is, funding that goes to Galax, Freeze, and Ivanhoe Fire Department for their respective first new areas in Carroll County.
And those entities cover that section.
Yes, sir. But there are standing and have been, personal mutual aid agreements, and right now, and in all honesty, I had the fire data broken out by department, but you might as well say they all been toned out 666 times because they all work on an automatic second tier. Do we get the adequate response every time? That might fluctuate, but they all have a primary and automatic second alarm dispatch.
Does Barron Springs and Floyd help in those remote areas also?
They do, and call dependent. Now, Hillsville several times, has called Barron Springs in all the way into the town proper as well. We had them out on Hallett Street. We had 8 different departments out on Hallett Street, simply for a water supply and management. So, well, way back on Easter, when the interstate, even us from Independence found our way over, so it just depends. But yeah, they do come in mutual aid, and in the same way for, EMS services, like Cassia County along that Parkway corridor.
Yeah.
So,
Do they have a station up there at, what's the name of that little community up there?
Willis,
No, not back,
Medizadine,
Mezzadine.
there's a fire department there.
yes. And that is that, well, just the other night out, maybe not a half mile down, I do this every time I look at the map, 630 Duxboro Road. Because of that second dispatch we're talking about, Hillsville's home directly dropped first, but Laurel Fork's fire chief said, have them stand by and let Medizadine, just because we want to pull primary resource, So we do keep regular working relationships with outside county resources as well.
And do we still do soft billing in the county?
Yes, sir.
And what's the time frame for Laurel Fork to get, is there a certain time frame for them to get back to?
I would have to revisit the letter, but I'm certain that the way it was worded, it was until otherwise notified.
Okay.
Dr. Etzel has the ability to see when our providers do call reports or run sheets. The state guideline is those have to be turned in or completed within 12 hours. Reporting on your patient care, And anytime that those are outstanding, the state compliance sees that, and as our OMD, that gets on his radar. So there were several operational issues that have led up to include delay in response, because if we're going through the protocol and towing them twice before the staff truck gets towed, you're just prolonging care for the patient.
Right.
So, it's something that we've not had we haven't had well-established dialogue, if you will, with our acting captain, documented in emails, and, you know, what can we do to help? And we don't want to see an entity go away. What can we offer in training? You know, we want to see these, it's essential coverage, you know, the community deserves it. So
Right.
we're in a position we want to help. Anything else?
I got a couple questions.
sir.
Like I said, like Mr. Early said, thank you for your presentation and coming out. His district's a lot like mine. It just seems like we're out there, and it's unfortunate that our local rescue squads aren't there. But I live close enough. I see the volunteers with the fire department. You know, they work very hard. Like, you know, Laurel and Piper's Gap and all them volunteers. You know, they're doing yeoman's work out there. What, I guess, number one, it'll be a two-part question, I guess. What are we doing now that the board has helped with the, the pay structure to recruit some of these people? Because I know a lot of them, you know, live near me and around through the county. They're still off, you know. And
So we're on our website, Fire Programs website, Indeed, and at one time it was posted on the Facebook's jobs page.
mhm.
We do have a recruitment flyer that I've just fine-tuned with HR as far as the language to put on the Emergency Management Facebook page to advertise that. It's been a give and take game. I mean, I was presenting data anytime that there was a job posting from any related department within 90 miles. In my younger days, I was willing to drive to Hickory. I tested in Hickory. I mean, you will find the job. So, and I was recording their starting salaries and whatnot. What we bumped up to made us very competitive to our closest competition, for lack of a better word, as in Whitfield. Well, they have heavy industry coming in. They're looking at stepping up their staffing, and that's going to up their pay. Blacksburg, Montgomery County is taking on career personnel, and they're starting their firefighter EMTs at a wage that our paramedics aren't even at, in the lower 50s. Every foot forward we take towards competitive pay. We've reached out, some of them gone to other departments. This is where we're at, you know, are you interested, can we talk? Like I said, and I sincerely say this, when qualified and sharp, intelligent firefighters and EMTs and paramedics live here but work other places, you know, shame on us for not being able to keep them at home. We ought to be benefiting from that, not other localities, for what that's worth. So we're trying. We've had several part-time, but the people that are applying part-time are also full-time in North Carolina, which is a whole nother pay scale that's really putting us towards the lower end again. But we might have competitive pay, and I spoke with Henry County's director just last week. They're in the same boat. They increased competitive pay, and they have several vacancies. The fire rescue community, just from burnout to other jobs, you know, a lot of people, even in the nursing and other medical fields, have walked away from this because of the past couple of years that it's had. So, I mean, we're beating the bush, but we're beating the same bush that every other jurisdiction is, or localities with these like jobs.
And I guess my second question is, how many trucks do we have currently, and what condition are they?
We have Unit 17, 18, 19, 21, 22, and 23. Those are 7. Did I count that right?
6, I think.
6, it is. I'm sorry. So there's 6 transport-capable ambulances. 22 and 23 are our newest chassis. They were remounts. The box came off the older truck, refabricated, renovated, if you will, and put on new chassis. I put in an RSA grant to replace 17. It's the second oldest truck. A 14 model, but it has the highest mileage. We did not get that grant, but we also have a long history of using RSAF just for truck replacement, which does not help in the narrative, the compelling argument. We have really maximized our maintenance right now. Just today, Unit 19 got a call back, brakes and rotors all the way around. Hey boss, it's making a noise, we get it looked at, well, all of a sudden, all brakes and all the rotors. So we had a little discussion on how long do you hear a squeak before you tell someone about it? I mean, we have the 2003 Excursion, which our Assistant Chief of EMS Operations utilizes as a response vehicle. Has 120,000 miles on it. It needs ball joints. We have the 2010 Dodge with a work body on it. That's the Unit 1000. It has ALS complement for medical calls. We have a cutter spreader for extrication, and we also have a small contingent of hand tools for firefighting. It's in its window for replacement, but it's still running good. But I'd have to look at the mileage exactly on that. We have Unit 18, which is kind of our standby. On full staffing, we run 4 trucks a shift. Our future staffing, I would like to keep the 4 trucks and have 1,000 all the time, because that would either intercept or help mitigate, is this a true risk? We would cut down on wear and tear. We've looked at having right now everyone comes to Hillsville, supply, get their stuff on the truck, then they go out to the Cana station for the day. Well, that up and down the mountain, if nothing else, just that, I feel like we can prevent that if you're stationed there. You go to any other department, you get a station assignment, that's where you go. You don't go to the main station every day. So we're trying to look at things to address the wear and tear. What we've traded off in the older days of transports, we've picked up those in our additional runs. Just by the coverage area that I showed you we've inherited over the past handful of years as well. 17 and 18 need to be replaced. That needs to be in our immediate planning. Unit 21 had a sensor in the transmission that we had replaced last week as a surprise repair to the tune of $2,800. So, and we can't afford for those to be down long. I mean, they're an essential vehicle to the county. So.
You ever have excessive response to incidents? Too many vehicles?
Yes, sir. But how that's an issue is very call dependent. Take for example, over this past weekend, the weather we were supposed to get. Christmas Eve a year ago, we ended up on the interstate for several hours that night, and we had trucks staged at crossovers at 14, and with the projected accumulation of snow, we put an action plan in place to stage units first. Let the primary department respond. Less is more on the interstate, and then if there's 3 cars on the shoulder, someone sees that, oh man, they've wrecked, but maybe they've just slid off. Is there true 6 patients in those cars? So we're working towards staging operations so we don't end up, having an officer on scene to take command and give a size up to prevent committing resources. We've had that happen. We'll go to a dispatch to a certain area, they finally make a volunteer crew in a certain area, and they send that truck also, but then the second call rolls off, and then you've got committed units with now another patient waiting. Whereas if we could stage these responses, we would have quicker turnaround or in-service times. So that's something we're working to address, yes, sir.
Gary, could you talk about a little bit about the process of billing, what service you're using and what's their protocol?
Right now, we're working through A&B Billing Company. Each month, I get around the 10th, I get a breakdown of a statement, and it's the commission to a percentage paid, right at 6%, give or take, for those services that come out of ours and the volunteer rescue squads, and then the rest are their reimbursement for billings for money earned basically through billing. We are soft billing. If a collection notice at all, if you will, goes out after the third time, it is just put onto a write-off column, basically. We looked at this probably 3 months ago, the potential of money that's sitting in that write-off column. I won't quote it, simply because I want to give you the accurate number, and I would be guessing that I'd have to go back and look at that number. But it stops right there. We do hard bill outside the county, if you will. When I took the position and trying to learn the ropes of this, it's been widely known that after that third, usually it just goes to this dead column, if you will. We have the potential to probably recoup a lot more, but I would have to speak with Mr. Watson on approaching that.
Is insurance billed?
Yes, sir.
Is that where it goes, to the insurance company or to the individual?
The majority of our patients or clients, if you will, fall in the self-pay category, or whatever Medicare, Medicaid will pay out. Usually, if it goes against a regular policy, that's funds recuperated.
So when they go out on a call, are they getting that information for insurance so they can bill the insurance company?
Well, that's collected in the hospital on what we call a face sheet or a data sheet for the patient. That happens at the facility. It's not collected on scene, if that's what you're asking. I might not be following, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, we personally had an issue where we had an ambulance called, and the ambulance bill was sent directly to us because in the end, the insurance information that the hospital had wasn't correct. So it was just billed to us. I mean, you know, we got it straightened out with the hospital, so we assumed that bill reverted back to where they got their information correct. But then I've had other people telling me that they're getting directly billed and it's never turned into their insurance company, that they're never asked for insurance information. I'll give you an example. Got a lady that called me recently that said she'd been billed 6 times for ambulance coming to her home. She wasn't transported. They did something for her while they were there, but 6 different times she was billed $75 each time. It's an 80-year-old female that I would assume Medicare or Medicaid would help to pay that. And then she said when she called in and asked what do we need to do, she was told just pay a little bit at a time. I mean, I'm thinking that ought to be Medicare, Medicaid, something.
The that $75 is a refusal fee. So they might check vitals. I'd have to look at the call to see exactly what was provided or what they needed to do. And at whatever point that she might have said, well, no, I don't want to go to the hospital. Okay, well, we've made contact, we, assessed you, we provided a service, that's a flat refusal fee.
So that's not billable to insurance.
My understanding is no, sir.
If they were transported to the hospital and didn't actually need to be, would that be billed to the insurance?
Well, you would then have load mileage and whatever. The providers are not gonna, you know, talk you out of going. Their job is if you feel like you need to go.
What if it's somebody that just doesn't want to go and probably they need to go? They get billed $75 for not going.
If we gone on scene and assessed you, but no, I just don't wanna go, then we would sign a refusal AMA against medical advice saying, the way you present, you probably need to be checked out further. We've initiated a service or a level of care. That's been the trend through its billing history. I mean, this has just been continued.
So it's
What-
not, so I think the way it's worded, a refusal fee, it's not really a refusal fee, it's a fee for services.
Right, but they're just refusing transport.
Right.
So if it were called something different, would the insurance pay for it?
I'd have to explore that. I don't know how.
And is that something that the billing company is, I guess I'm wondering is what has been done as far as billing is concerned to find out, I'm assuming that number is rather large that's in the file 13. I'm wondering what's been done with the billing to make sure that things have been billed correctly, that people, you know, a lot of times people refuse it because they know after 3 times they're not going to see it again. But it may just be that the insurance company should have been paying it and they're not because they're not getting it.
We have a twofold process for Q&A. So our paramedics take all their ALS calls and set criteria, STEMI, stroke, chest pain, etc., diabetic emergencies. So before that call or run sheet is locked and goes on, they check that. Your patient care demographics, and then it's vetted through Assistant Chief Phelps. On the flip side, before anything goes further to the billing company, Misty and or myself, we look at the insurance data, the demographics, that all those fields are populated, so there's not kickback on that run, if you will. Prior to billing, that's our vetting process through ALS protocol, the provider, and then also on the billing demographics. So that data is populated and is there to be reported.
So it sounds like if there's not something at a medical facility that is run through with the insurance company, then the emergency services has nothing to go, they have nothing to tie it back to as a transport or anything like a refusal or anything like that.
Right.
Basically, that's what, it's all about coding anyway, my understanding. I know one time, a couple years ago, we had some issues with coding being wrong when it come down to the billing processes, and they had to address that.
Well, that's why we brought the lieutenants in as a second set or third set of eyes, just to make sure before it's sent beyond our desks that I's are dotted and T's are crossed. I mean, if we don't have a run sheet or a face sheet, we're on the phone with the hospital. We need that demographic or patient data, which to include has the insurance data on it. I mean, that's part of the paperwork side of that job, is to make sure we've got accurate data that it goes against billing when insurance is filed.
Is our rates acceptable to most insurance companies? I mean, they'll pay the full amount you bill them typically, or yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
The contract with A&B in extension, I guess, for lack of a better word, we're reviewing that as far as moving forward, or what those rates are, what we're paying for that service as well, what they're doing on what is going to collections versus what is not. I'll leave it at that.
Did you say their fee is 6%, A and B? For
We were on a 3-year contract, and the first year is at one rate because we bought equipment and those type of things, and it went down 0.25%, went down 0.25%. We haven't signed a new contract, but right now we're on that, whatever that amount is. I can look it up. I was actually going through the numbers as far as hard billing. And I'm just going to give you an approximate. If from 2020, and this is not a number that is exactly right, but and I'm pulling up the years to see which years it's covering under. For data services, it goes back to about 2018 to 2020. It has some 16 and 17, but not many calls on there. We wrote off, I'm gonna say since 2017, about 244,000.
Is there a fee paid to them whether or not there's a collection?
From my understanding, it's based off of the collection of what they get. So, from my understanding, they get the run sheets after the information is gathered. It's sent to the insurance company. The insurance company attempts to collect it. If it is soft billed, some of them are not. Some go to collections, but if it's soft billed, it comes back to the emergency services, and then I'm not sure if they send an additional letter or not.
For the soft billing,
Yes.
3 times.
Okay, and they send a billing for 3 times, they can't collect it. So then, depending on if you're soft billing that or hard billing that one, where it goes from there.
So the percentage fee is based on collections and not billed?
Yeah, they'll deduct that amount when they send us ours.
I have this breakdown monthly that at a glance breaks that up. I mean, if it would help.
What's it got on it now?
It's one of the distribution disbursement pages that I code out. It's 5.75% what the commission rate and then the reimbursement on billing funds. That monthly breakdown.
Is how much?
5.75.
Okay, so that's what it is, 5.75% of collected.
And do you know how much was billed in 2022 or 2021?
I would have to log into A and B to get that month-end report. All I save is the disbursement, but I can get you that information if.
One of the issues that you run into when it comes to billing, and this is and I'm gonna assume it's the same here, is there's a set fee that you bill, and then there's a negotiated price. You know, the ones that have insurance that they're paying for themselves, it's a private company, they pay better than what Medicare or Medicaid would. So you might bill, you know, out of the 100%, out of all the dollars billed, you might only get 40% of it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's based on the number of people you have and what type of insurance they have. And then out of that 40%, then you only collect a percentage of it too. So you may bill some huge outlandish number, and then it's negotiated down to this number. Now, the worst part about the system is that if you have no insurance, then that super high bill that's not negotiated at the cost is sent to that individual and asked them to pay it. So if you have no insurance and a bill's $800, well, you get billed for $800. But that same bill only might pay $150 through Medicare. There's no way of adjusting that down for the person that has no insurance. And that's really the hard part about insurance and how it works with billing.
Does anybody have anything else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Bergeron.
Thank you all.
Moving on down on the agenda, next, goals and discussion.
Okay, sent out this information and was asking for some goals on this questionnaire. You did receive a handout on this and how it scored. What we were trying to do in this process is generate an idea of where we want to go in the future, the things that are most important. So as we go through the budget this year and through the CIP and the way the funds are spent, how we can plan to accomplish these things that we want to look at. Of course, broadband is one of the most important things that we can think of in Carroll County, and we continue to work on that. But you have your list here, and these are ranked based on the responses we've got and the ranking. So if a person ranked 1 as 1 and somebody ranked 1 at 8, you're at 4.5. Okay, so it ranked, and then the number was generated on the number of points that were done. So it's not something that we need to move forward with, we need to vote on. However, I just wanted to come through and talk a little bit about them, and then as we go on through the planning process, determine how we want to fund these long-term goals, okay? So broadband, as far as expansion of that, we are working forward on that. We have, and after we go through this, then we're going to talk about the CIP and ARPA. As far as our CARES money or our additional funds that we received above for the capital improvement. Your broadband expansion, there is money budgeted, there's $1 million budgeted in our ARPA to go toward this, okay? It won't touch it, but it might be able to help us work with other companies in order to try to find the additional funding that's needed, okay? We did apply for the last round. At the last moment, we were did not have enough data in order to do the main part of Carroll County, okay? And the second part that we applied for that was sent in was actually kicked out because we weren't doing universal. So in other words, we didn't do it all, so we didn't get funded for this one piece, okay? I have reached out to, a group of us have reached out to the granting organization. We're going to have some phone calls with them. We've got one set up. We've also heard from Charter. They're still interested in doing that area that they want to. They want to see how we can still work together and still make this happen. And that's the area that Charter has in the southern part of the county, which they have RDOF funding that does it, and then there's some additional ones they want. So I'm going to have some conversations with them to see if there's a possibility of moving that forward. Emergency substations and operational facilities. You heard a presentation today.
Quick question
Sorry,
before you move on.
Yeah.
Charter, what type of service are they offering?
They're looking at putting in fiber to the homes.
Okay.
So it is, they have existing service in that area, but I think with the RDOF money and for any other things they're looking at, they're going to start putting fiber in instead of going to any type of copper pair or anything.
Okay, and the email that some of us got from, I thought they were also in the southern part of the county doing wireless.
Mm-hmm.
FastLink.
That's
FastLink is I'll be honest with you, whenever I hear somebody that wants to look at having internet and they don't have it, I usually send to FastLink, and then there's another company that I contact. Mainly FastLink is they're on the spot. They come straight out and they will evaluate whether or not they can go. If I'll send them an email, or I'll send it to the customer, the person that I talk to or sent me an email. I tell them, hey, you need to check with this. I check before I send back to them. I send it to FastLink. They verify if they might be able to do it. I put them together, and he'll go out and look at it and make sure he can.
Well, I'm sure he's hungry for business,
Yes.
but I don't want that to get in the way of actually getting broadband in this county.
That's correct. The idea of fiber to the home is what we're working at right now.
Okay.
And I have one thing too on broadband before we move on. That was always been my number one, I feel like, in the community I serve. Not only is it prioritized as a budget goal, what can we do as a board or you as a county administrator to get with these companies that we have it, to get it operable, that's there?
And that's a tough one. There's a lot of fiber in Carroll County.
They put probably half as much as last this fall,
everywhere. I'm on the same boat with Tracy on this. we need to do something to force CenturyLink to do their job.
If you've used grant money and taxpayers' money to put it in the ground, and it has to be done by a deadline, I just cannot understand why the deadline of it being done, you get payment versus it be lit up.
And I'm not gonna say this is all of the reason why, but some of the things that I have found is they lay this main line and they'll tie two areas in together. And it's not engineered to provide service. The problem with broadband is you can't just go to any site and just drill a hole in it and I can send water there, okay? What happens is when they design the line, they have to put a drop. And then they put a piece of equipment, and then they got to run more fiber to each home or to each area. So they buried all this fiber that's in, a lot of it. I'm going to say they buried a lot of this fiber in it. And they're running the communication from one place to another. So they're trying to get data as quick as they can from one side of the state to the other side of the state to out west. So they're not looking at the individual customers except for large users such as businesses. Sometimes they'll tie into a business.
It's just like when gas went right through the middle of the county. It went through the county and it wasn't used.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they put this big line in, it's high pressure, that then you got to sit a substation in order to do it. And then from there, they have to run all the lines out. And that's the same thing, fiber. They're putting these big, massive cables in here that have, they're small, but they put these lines in, and then they need to tap off of them. Well, these companies that are running these lines down through there are not worried about. They're worrying about, I need broadband internet to my other customers over here. So they might be tying in somebody in upper part of the state to this area, and everybody in between, they can't see the financial side of it. To run, when we looked at this in the last grant, it was approximately, to light up Carroll County, it was a little bit over $52 million.
Well, last week they had 3 virtual days for the schools, and it's hard to do anything virtual without broadband.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I agree 100%. I mean,
And most of these, I agree with what you're saying that they want to go to point A, point B, but most of these, I watched them take them to a ped or a building. It has to be for right there.
I think, and I don't know if the technology's changed, but my understanding is they can run them, they can feed out of the box, one of the boxes you're talking about. Mm-hmm. They're repeating the signal and they're doing the things in it. They can do a service about 8 square miles from one.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's things we can look at, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that's one of the reasons why is that you have fiber running in front of your house and they're not connecting to it.
Oh yeah, I know that process, like the one Facebook that's going to DC, but there's a lot of them like on 52 and different places. They run them to their brick buildings that they have set up for that system, And I can talk to the employees all day long and they say, well, all they got to do is light it up and run it from here to the house because it's already there now. But seems like that never gets done.
well, it's like you said, they and I back up and I say they've used taxpayers' money to do this with, and they've come all the way from Galax out Piper's Gap and Chances Creek, and there's no major industries that they're hooked to through, and it just is really frustrating, especially when the community and the citizens see these people out here doing this, and they ask what they're doing, and they get told, well, we're putting in fiber optic cable, and it's...
I've reached out to CenturyLink, and you can talk to them guys. Them guys are just like everybody else. They're, overworked and underpaid. And the only way you can get to the right people through CenturyLink, it seems like, is ever who signed these VDOT permits. They had to have somebody to permit to run it through there. And I think them's the routes we got to take. My first year on the board, one of the things that come up was Comcast wanting to do a 10-year franchise agreement with us. And, I voted no because if they want, they should be here to tell us what they're going to do for us. If not, but hiding their hair. But back to your number 2, I guess.
And I agree with all of you.
It's frustrating.
Should we not consider hiring a consultant
It's
to
frustrating.
look into this specific thing? I know we've not had good good results in the past, and the folks that were hired supposed to do thing, you can't do it.
Well,
No.
You got a whole agency here to run, but I'm just wondering if we could at least hire somebody for at least 1 year, or at least discuss that.
I think we need to get the ear of people in Richmond. When you look around Carroll County, every county around us is part of that 90% plan, and we're left out. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. We need our representatives to carry the ball for us, because apparently they haven't been.
I'm gonna say something positive, but from my understanding, they're looking at putting more money toward broadband this year than what they did in the last one. And I'm hoping, I'm not gonna give a date, but I'm hoping that there's more funding coming out, hopefully in spring. We're trying to work with the people that recommend this money to be given to different organizations, different local government, different counties. We're going to work with them directly in order to try to get this money at this upcoming thing.
Maybe we ought to, as a board, send something to our delegate and to our senator and tell them we'd like to have a loud voice for Carroll County on this.
The lead time is incredibly long, and in the meantime, businesses go to Wythe County, Pulaski, because they've got broadband and everything else that you might want if you're going to try to make any money. So that's a good idea, Robbie. I think that we need a resolution, or we need our representatives here to hear our frustration and desire to get broadband, because we're never going to get any business here without it.
Okay, we'll add this to the next meeting and vote on it so that we can start taking some action in that direction.
And Rex probably has a good idea too. Maybe we do need a consultant, but I sometimes think that we hire these people to do studies and consulting, and we don't get a dollar's worth of work out of them. But
That's my concern when you discuss that.
I know I read through the broadband survey and it was a little bit disappointing to see the response, especially from businesses. And maybe the people are just getting so frustrated and feel like that we're not trying our due diligence to get broadband in this area. But it's something that's.
And I actually just received a draft of the final report. What I shared with you guys are the results from the survey. So there's more information coming out, but hopefully I'll get it read this week, and we'll go through and send it back so we can get a final report generated.
Are you gonna go down through?
Okay, I can go to the next one, absolutely.
Done got her blood pressure up.
Okay, the second one we've got is emergency services substation operational facilities. You heard a real good presentation today. There is a move toward in the future as we start recruiting and funding to have some more substations. Hopefully, and the goal is provide quicker responses and better facilities. So you heard the presentation today. I just wanted to bring that up. And questions?
Just to reemphasize, the redheaded stepchildren in this group here, Duxbury and Law Fork, we need some loving.
Right smart.
You looked at that map. There's a lot of area in those two areas
Yeah, absolutely.
that needs to be covered. Yeah.
And that's one thing, I understand this presentation that, and he made mention our numbers were low, but we don't have the luxury of Piper's Gap and Laurel helping
No.
out too,
No.
so.
And all the people that you had, volunteers, are
Yeah,
close passed away.
yeah, it's unfortunate.
Okay, next item, employee recruitment and retention plans. Over the next several years, we need to, it was number 3, we need to look at what we can do, and some of it's money and some of it's other things. you know, in order to try to find ways for our employees. You know, Mr. Bergeron's running the same issue that I run into since I've been here. When you advertise positions and you get just a couple people applying for them, it's tough to find the right people. And we need to make ourselves to the point where we keep the good ones, the great ones we have, and to try to find, be the place that people want to work. You know, when you know, I'm proud to say I work at Carroll County. I want other people to think they want to be here too. And it's not just, you know, pay means a lot, but also the environment that you work in is important. So
When it comes to employee recruitment, Mike, and volunteer recruitment for that matter, is there any way that the county could create a website, a clearinghouse of opportunities? I mean, to be quite honest, those things are hard to find. I mean, I've had people tell me in the county that I need people for these positions, and I couldn't tell you where they're posting it. The average person who lives in Carroll County is not seeing these postings. I think that's our number one problem. If they're not seeing them, they don't know they're available.
And I know Facebook is a big thing getting information out, but I don't do Facebook for many reasons, but there are others that don't do it either, so it needs to be accessible elsewhere.
Yeah, a website. I mean, a website can be shared on Facebook or any other place.
Yeah.
maybe we'll look into that. I think that's a good opportunity to get out there. One of the things is, you know, for a long time, you know, the procedure is you put a newspaper. Well, you know, the ads in the newspaper are pretty expensive, and you know, so we'll look at other ways that we could possibly advertise these and to do them.
One thing we don't use religiously that, like Galax, of course we call it, I don't know what we call it, I call it Nixle.
Nixle and Gale.
I get every one of the, from Galax, get their, I mean, when they shut down, the recreation department's closed, or the games are canceled, or school's canceled, or there's something going on the interstate, or tell you stay home, don't call 911 when it snows, and, you know, stuff like that. I'm constantly getting those, and we don't send much out, you know.
Maybe we don't advertise that's out there.
Yeah, because we could get folks to sign up for it, and they would get these alerts, and that might be something, you know, I don't know, we have a clearinghouse to send alerts out. The board is looking for such and such number of folks to serve on boards, you know. It takes a while to build those folks who would sign up for it, but I think it would be helpful. That's another way we could hit some of our folks.
Okay, economic and community development project funding. One of the things, and we'll touch on it when we get to CIP, is to try to put reserve funds, that county funds that are put into, for no better word, an account in order to do projects in the future. Okay, and our financial policy, there is a way of setting it up in order to help with, if you receive a grant, there's some funding set aside so that if, you know, say we get a grant and it needs a 20% match, you can spend a 20% and then build that back up in time, okay? There's also part of the CIP is looking at putting money back so you can start growing it. So eventually, you know, I'm not a big fan of just going out and spending money on something or borrowing money to do it. I like to try to look for a grant, try to look for funding, trying to find a way to do it, and then use 20% of the county's money in order to do 100% of the project. And that's one way to look at these type things. And we're on our first step to go in that direction. So any questions or? Radio system backbone repair updates, emergency services. I think we've heard many times about the problems that we have. There's really our backbone is outdated. It's got issues on it. The only problem is right now we're looking at a large expenditure possibly. The RFP's been sent out for the two different types of systems for the radios. There's a grant that's been applied for in order that will provide 70% of the funding, but it's still a lot of money. You know, when you're looking at $6 million at 30% match, 1.8 is still a good dent in it. So we're looking at the different ways that it can be done. It needs to be, our backbone needs to be fixed now, but we're trying to figure out if, you know, if we're going to, you know, to spend the money to fix the backbone, is that money that if when we go to put in a system that is going to be better for our community, or are we wasting that money? So hopefully the next month or so, we're still, you know, from my understanding, we've gotten quotes on what it would take to fix it. We're in dire need. There's an expense there that's going to come. We're working to try to keep that expense as low as we can, and still, you know, my first concern is the services in Carroll County. And then I'm looking at interoperability. Okay, you need to be interoperable, but you need to take care of the people in the county first. So we're trying to find the best economical way in order to do this without spending a lot of money that's not going to be reusable.
Mike, am I remembering this correctly, that even with the newest and best equipment, our coverage would still only be about 90%? Is that?
I think it's a little less than that, actually. I think we might get 90% on in-car radios, but our handhelds were
Down lower?
Yeah, it was 40, 50% or something like that. The difference between the two systems, there's a P95 and then we're looking at an X-Edge DMR. The difference is P25, grants will fund it. Next Edge, they won't. But the cost difference in it, you can probably do Next Edge depending on how much money you get for the grants. So, and there's actually, you can use two systems. We can do, like, as long as the three communities stay one of the two, you can pick one of each. So you can actually run P25 in two communities, or all three, or you could just run the Next Edge in one and P25 in the other two. You just can't go P25 Next Edge DMR. But we did, from my understanding, in the RFP that was sent out, they're going to ask for quotes for all of them. So I'm hoping that we will get underneath that figure, that match, if we receive it. But it does require a 30% match, and it is done through Carroll County. So we'd be the administrator of it because we have the best opportunity to receive funding. You know, any more?
Looks to me like we need towers for the radio system. You need towers for your broadband. We should merge those, look at combining those, whatever we do, all at the same time. We don't own any towers, but there's a lot of places we could put towers and purchase land.
The coverage that they're talking about now is to, with the towers that we have, okay? Once you get this system in, then you'll be able to add a tower in order to expand it in different areas. But one of the issues and that the consultant came through is certain towers, they looked at being added, and the cost benefit wasn't there. You weren't going to pick up another few square miles to put a tower up in an area. So, but those need to be addressed by us as far as where those more important areas are. Because there might be an area that's not looked at, you know, we really need to stick something in. All right. Capital improvement plan funding last year, we were able to, in the last fiscal year, was able to put some money back for a capital improvement plan. As you will see, the capital improvement plan, as it's funded on an annual basis, we're wanting to do as far as, and I use this example, what happens is you put something on a CIP, you don't do that item, and then the money's needed for something else. Okay, so you're never moving forward. We've got deferred maintenance, we've got other costs, we've got projects that we'd like to see done or need to be done. In the last year, on this year's budget, we have allotted money for the CIP, and we took money from projects from the year before and are going to put that in the CIP. So the goal is to pre-fund the items in your CIP. So that if you, let's say if this year you approve a fire truck to be purchased and it's not done, then that money should go into an account to say that's what it's used for. Okay, and that number will fluctuate based on, increased cost. We try to estimate of both, but if you put an item off for long enough, it will grow out of your reach. And unfortunately, that does happen. You start out at a $200,000 project, next thing you wait 5 years and it's a $400,000 project. So this gives us the opportunity to move forward with capital improvement plan.
In reality, the capital improvement plan should be number one, because you can't fund 1 through 5 unless you have to.
Well, there is definitely most things, okay? A lot of these items here that you see cannot be funded on your operating budget every year. So unless you're saving that money or saving a certain amount of money you put toward it, the problem with it is if you don't fund it the way we're doing it, you find other ways to spend it. So, and anything on a capital improvement plan can be changed, but that money is now set aside because we've set up that fund to be used for those type of projects. You can't just all of a sudden, well, you shouldn't all of a sudden go up and say, okay, we're short on operating this year, we're going to pull it out of our CIP and pay the phone bill. Okay, this shows to you that you need to have this, you need to be able to operate without tying into your savings. And that's the basics behind the financial policies and the CIP as far as not get back in the situation it was prior. So the recreations, the Woodlawn School property and playground system, exit 14, that's another one you put into a capital improvement project. A capital improvement plan is just how you justify your list is going to go. So that you might have the Woodlawn School, we hope to fund, in your budget, we have not put in there enough operating funds to cover the average maintenance. So like your recreation department, they need to have money every year for not just the operations. They need to have things so that they can buy, you could put, and I'm just going to use around, $20,000 or $30,000 in an account. This year they'll buy helmets, and next year they'll buy gloves, and next year they'll buy something else. And you have to have that general maintenance that you do yearly. And I'm saying under a certain value. So you can't pay out $300,000 worth of playground equipment out of your operating budget. Okay, so those are items that you have to save up. And then we have to plan how we purchase them, whether you go to exit 14 and put all this money into that one area or you spread it out in different areas throughout the community. You can buy, 300, and I'm just using a rough number, 300,000 an hour, you can spend 100,000, 3 different locations. Yeah. And stagger it around so that you're not coming up with 300,000 at one time. Because what happens is you put it all in at the same time, it all goes bad at the same time. If you put in some here and some here and some here, then you can get in a rotation to keep good equipment and pay for it in the long run. And don't get me wrong, I think it's a great location. I think that there's a lot of good equipment there. I think that, you need to have a nice park, but there's other areas that can use those just as well. So that's one of the things that would be in your capital improvement project to look at. As we go on down the list, farmers market, wholesale improvements and renovations. We have had, just to let you know, I've had some conversations. We had a conversation right before the Department of Agriculture as far as the farmers market, the wholesale side. Okay, when when I first came here and they mentioned farmer's market, I thought it was the place down there where I buy apples and oranges. And I stopped in there and you get the fruit and everything's great. But then you learn this is a wholesale improvements. And, you know, when I first came here, there were some questions on whether or not we could actually operate one. Okay. We've reached out to the Department of Agriculture and we're going to set up some additional meetings to get a determination on that. From my understanding, the way that I read the code is that the Commissioner of Agriculture can enter into agreements that allow you to operate those as a municipality, which we have no agreement on the books. And I feel like that's part of the reason why that it hasn't been, you know, and I don't even know if there's been a request in the past, but we haven't invested in it. So, you know, my opinion is on it that you need to keep it up and make it operate and make it a long-term thing. Or, you know, if you're not going to invest in it, you don't need it, and you ain't allowed to run it, then that's not something we should do. Okay, I think it's a great service for our community as far as for the farmers. I think that the people there do a great job. I think they work with old stuff that needs to be either fixed up, and we also need to determine as far as looking for grants to try to get some of the stuff. I think the chillers that they have down there were purchased and installed by the county, but I think the grant came from somewhere in order to survive those. And those are things you need to look at as far as you know, maybe the Department of Agriculture or the General Assembly can provide us funding to help with that. The first thing, we need to get that agreement in place to make sure that we can invest in the long-term use of that facility. So that's something we're working on now. But there's some definite needs in there also.
Is there any money now set aside in the capital improvement?
I don't believe so.
There may be a little bit. I'll have to look in there,
Okay.
see. It's not in the immediate, not what the chiller replacements would be.
Uh-huh.
And with me saying that, you know, and I'm probably stepping out here where I shouldn't, but when you sell product through a wholesale market, the farmers, they get certified. And Rex, you might have to help me out. What's it called? TAF?
Something like that.
Yes. Well, what they do is they get through a program in which they tell when they spray and how often they spray and what they use and their products in order to sell to a grocery store. Like if they're going to sell to Grants or Food City or one of these other places, you have to be certified through this thing. And not all the farmers in Carroll County are. So if you were to, you know, to operate this in a better way, you could get them to produce produce. And it's not just, you know, it's not just that, it's a way of finding ways to market new products. So you're not just doing cabbage, now you're doing cabbage, you're doing corn, you're doing apples, you're doing pumpkins, you know, you're diversifying your crop. It can be anything, and there needs to be a way of, if there's a market for it, for the general person, you know, they might only plant 20 acres, but if they can get that certification, they can compete with the bigger boys in order to sell the same product, the same price that the big growers in your same community are getting. So it's a good opportunity. It's just we need to work on it some. The next item, procurement and development of property for Fairgrounds. This is just a long-term hope. I think it's, as you know, the last year was, we got to have the fair back. I wouldn't say it was 100%, but it seemed like it was a pretty good event. That space there is limited, okay? It's only used for that event one time a year. I mean, there's no other, I'm gonna say we don't have a fairgrounds that's used as a fairgrounds. We have a facility that we do the fair at. Okay, it's a better way of putting it. Okay, so they utilize the building. They build their track every year. They have the vendors come in. They one thing that's a good piece of property could be used for something else, and then they use the property across the street from the farmer's market to do all the parking. You know, in the long run plan, there might be an opportunity to find a piece of property, be able to, you know, even maybe sell the property there, put it towards something. You know, find a piece of property, have them fair. I'm not saying build a facility that is premier. I'm talking about a fairgrounds. I'm talking about you have a rink, aluminum bleachers, and maybe a building that you can use more than for other things. You know, you don't want to, I always felt like you need a community building, something that people, you know, everybody can use. You know, if you want to have an event, you know, if you want to have, I mean, it's hard to find places these days to have a birthday party, you know, I mean, and you could tie it into the agricultural departments, you know, and I'm not saying at a huge cost, you know, I'm not looking at, you know, and I don't want to compete with Apex, okay? I'm not trying to compete with anybody like that. You know, one of these facilities, as far as a fairgrounds, it would be a area in which you know, you have 30 acres or something. I'm gonna guess, you know, 20, 30 acres. You have the rink, like I said, the aluminum bleachers. You have a couple buildings you tied into your agricultural department with your school. And then you have, and I don't want to get into the event business either, okay? I don't want to get into hosting all the types of things, but, you know, maybe in the long run, we can look at, you know, forming a actual fair, and I'm going to say organization. You know, I'd like to see us turn into, right now we have a fair committee, okay? You know, as far as a, you know, and I've mentioned it before, in passing with people in the community a little bit, but you know, we need to fund the fair, but we need to make it so that they can grow it to whatever level they want and whatever level is down. So if we provided funding and they were a 501c3, then they could manage those things, and they could possibly have their own events during the year if they wanted to as a fundraiser. You know, they're able to, you know, if they want to have a lawnmower race in the middle of summer, say a 4th of July event, we can't do it now because they take it up every year, put it back down, and put all the work into doing it, you know, or similar things like that. And it could be anything from, you know, maybe a group of people want to use it to have a quilt show, or they want to have you know, some other things. It's just a community service, but it's one of those items that have to be planned in the long run. I just think it's a.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, is there enough room at the training center to do something like that?
That's possible. Absolutely. It's not a bad idea.
We could house EMS there, we could house everything there.
Yeah, that's not a bad place to have it, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's right in the middle of the county, and so you could do other things there too besides just that.
That's true. Yep.
How many acres does the county own across from the farmer's market?
It's a bunch.
It's about 70-some acres there or something.
I was wanting to say around 80-something, but I don't know.
The property goes from there all the way on that road there, goes all the way to the interstate, goes all the way to the top of the hill. We were actually looking at it the other day. You know, a lot of it goes up at a pretty good slope. I think it's about 8.5% grade. Might have been a little bit higher.
20 years ago, we looked at selling the land the rec department is on and moving it somewhere. Maybe you move the entire rec department out there. Because that, you know, it's got commercial development potential there at the interstate.
Mm-hmm.
Where Walmart might put theirs near the interstate this big.
Yeah, we'll hear boatmen complain about the noise. Do lawnmower race.
Okay. The other item is recreational activity, trails and sports. This is quality of life. This is to put on. It was added on to the existing list. You know, and we're currently, there is a push to market Carroll County. One of the things that we don't do, and I've said it before, we don't market ourselves very well when it comes to activities and things in Carroll County. So it's one of the things that we're working with VIA and I believe tourism as far as trying to market some of these activities that we have. I think we have a lot of great opportunities. I just, if you just don't know where they're at. I mean, we don't tell people where the good fishing is, and we don't tell people where the good hiking is, and unless you live here, you'll never know. So I think that's very, very important for us to try to move forward. And hopefully as we grow our tourism and our tourism office, and some of these activities will be more put out there. And then the last item I have is update comprehensive plan. I think we're in the process of starting to move forward with that. That is something that needs to be done. I always say that after a certain amount of time, you really need to look at it real hard and then update it every so often. That should be a moving document. It shouldn't have to be, you shouldn't wait 6 to 10 years to do it. When you get past a certain period, you almost need to really dip into it hard in order to do a complete overhaul. So, and that's one thing we're looking at. I think the board has received some presentations or some information on it, and I'd say we're going to move forward on it. But that pretty much covers their goals. I just want to go through them and get me to be able to have an idea of the direction we want to move. Any questions while we're looking at it?
Hearing none, we'll move on to the CIP and the ARRPA discussion.
Okay. You got a real shallow copy.
I provided a copy that you may need a magnifying glass to see. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff on there. That is the 2-page document that has a list by department of what some of the items are. A lot of times the CIP ties back in with the comprehensive plan. And unfortunately, the CIP plan here at the county has had some items pile up that are not just forward-facing things that benefit the citizens immediately, but things that have to be immediately done to be able to provide the services that we have now. So there's a lot of things on there that are just kind of built up maintenance over the year that are more maintenance-related items. It's a long-term plan. The county currently has one on file. To my knowledge, when I started, I was pretty excited to see that we had that. But then once I got started, we really weren't utilizing that. So in the fall, we went through with all the departments and really tried to get an updated position on these are the items that are usually too big or too infrequent for putting in the regular budget. The sheriff's office, they have such a high turnover of their vehicles. So those are not on here. Those are more budgetary items, as where some other departments, build inspection, ones where vehicles aren't used to the extent that they are in the sheriff's office, those will be on here. So it's a lot of larger items that really kind of are in need of maintenance and replacement. As part of the budget process, hopefully what we'll do this year, and if you all see any items on here specifically that you have questions about or items that you want added on here, let us know. But what we'll hope to do as part of the budget process this year will be to approve this CIP plan so we can put that out there and have that as a forward-facing document. But it's also not approved to the level of the budget. So just because we approve this isn't setting us in stone that we're going to do by this item in year 2027. It just says this is what we plan to work towards. In the fall, what we did to help put focus towards the CIP plan and what the county needs to do to kind of maintain these items is we set up a separate CIP fund So much like the general fund will have a budget for the CIP fund this year, and where we'll have some specific projects listed. And usually those will be listed by department at a higher level in the budget. But we'll have those specifically listed out so that those departments can get those items planned for those items. As Mike said earlier, we're trying to basically fund our CIP a year in advance so we can kind of get these things rolling and get these projects done. So we transferred the money that we had sitting there from last year over to the CIP fund, and we're starting to work on some of those projects that have been approved so far.
And it also gives, one of the things about this is we take, the money's taken, put it into an account for the CIP. In order to spend those funds, they come back in front of this board as far as to reappropriate them. So you'll get another level of oversight. You'll not only get to see the capital improvement plan, but you'll also get to see that the funds are spent before they'll be allocated again, whichever year that needs allocated in.
And so an example to expand on that is, in the past, we've kind of gotten, I wouldn't say, we've had difficulties budgeting, say, for the reassessment. We didn't set money aside for that. We didn't set money aside for that. Oh no, it's a year, we got to come up with $300,000 for the reassessment. And you have no choice. That's one thing that you have to do and you have to come up with. So what this does is it lets us put that money in that account. You can see it sitting there. That line item will build, and in that year reassessment, then we have the money sitting there to pay it. So we're not trying to cut operating budgets, cut services, come up with revenue, out of nowhere to try to fund those things that we should have seen coming. And hopefully that'll help give more stability to the county in the long run.
Any questions for Justin on that? Are you gonna cover the ARPA too?
Yes, I was going to mention something. In the bottom of the CIP, you have economic development projects. That right there is how you will fund some type of long-term economic project. So as I said before, if you want to extend water or you want to do these type of projects, this is where you go in and it can be any type of economic development projects. Like I said, you expand water. Well, okay, it takes more than a year to do a water plan, okay? I mean, as far as you're going to extend water out a road or you want to do these type things, it's a lot of money. Well, this gives you opportunity to build you a fund. So if you want to find a project and there's money out there to match, if it's going to be a Virginia Department of Health or another type of funding group that is going to give it, this comes up with your match so you're not going in debt for it and you can fund these projects. Any other questions, or we can move to the ARPA? And on the last page of this, you'll also see where each, what you're looking at, funding the ARPA money and the things up above it. Go ahead, Justin.
All right, so the ARPA, a little bit of background on that. That's kind of last year was the CARES money. More people were aware of what that was. And then under the Biden administration last year was the Arpa Grant. The federal government pushed out the money again. In total, this spreadsheet is the landscaped. It's at the top, it's ARPA spending plan. On the last page, you'll see that the county in total will receive $5,786,553. We'll receive that in 2 allotments. We have our first, and we should receive the next allotment probably late spring, early summer. And what this spreadsheet does is this breaks down the categories that is allowable use of the funds. We have 4 categories that we're allowed to spend the money under. Some of them are more restrictive than others. And we continue to receive new guidance on how the funds can be spent and tracked and the reporting of those. What we've put together to try to plan for is we're trying to strategically utilize the funds to help as much of the CIP and the maintenance things that, we probably should have been done up until now. So we've got, some various items on there, COVID response vehicles, some of the coordinator vehicles, and then we're also doing some, hoping to do some, moving some offices around and expanding to allow for increased social distancing. And then just kind of a detail of what those projects could be used for. What we'll do with the current year for the similar to the CIP, it's in its own separate fund. So that'll be a separate budget that we approve as part of the overall budget process. These are the projects that we've anticipated for so far. It's very preliminary. A lot of the costs, are still coming in of what we expect. So, at the bottom, you'll see that we've projected it out. We've projected to spend more than what's there. But again, that's just a preliminary budget of what we've kind of anticipated so far. And I can go through specifics on the grant if you all have any questions as far as what maybe some of the requirements are or any of the specific line items.
You said there were 4 areas, Justin?
Yeah, so
what are they?
The 4 areas are Category A's public health emergency and negative economic impacts. That's kind of similar to how CARES money was used, what we're doing to respond, whether it's actually responding, with the vehicles, or if it, is social distancing measures increased in the office area. And then there is Category B, which is premium paid to eligible workers. This is a very difficult area to spend money out of. CARES money was a little bit looser on the rules of how you could spend that. This is a little more strict. We have used $38,498 as part of matching requirement. The comp board issued bonuses to the sheriff's office, or hazard pay to the sheriff's office, sworn officers earlier in the year. This was the matching piece that we used from the CARES or the ARPA money to match those that are not covered under comp board but are sworn officers. And then governmental services to the extent of revenue reduction. This is a new area that we're looking into. The guidance is coming out almost daily on how to use this type of funding. So we're still exploring the options there. And then D is investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure.
The broadband study, is that the 34,625
That's right.
that we just did? And the TBD on the capital improvement for that?
We had allocated $1 million at this time. But again, like Mike said earlier, we're still in the process on those things.
And some of these items will change. The sewer CIP, where we had required plant renovations based, and which we did do the flow study out of here, but those plant renovations might have an opportunity to use those to, if we can find a better way as far as use them. There's some conversations that might be held that we might be able to partner with other groups in order to maybe not have to do those renovations, but use that money to, where we can use that money in order to find a different opportunity.
What plant renovation?
On sewer 1, at exit 1, there's
okay.
a sewer plant that's under a consent order.
We trying to talk to the town maybe about bringing some sewage back to the town?
Yes, we had, they actually put in the ARV, and there was a leak between the ARV and the actual pump station. So they're going to fix that, and once they fix that, then we're going to test it on down the line. So been a slow process. Any other questions?
You going to speak on the financial management possibly while you're at it?
Absolutely. Justin, I'll let you start on this
All
one.
right.
I've talked a lot, now it's your turn.
So the financial management policies, that's the bigger document you all have. I think in total it's 14 pages. So what we've tried to do here is, really try to take, where the county's come from, where we've gotten now, and really keep us moving in that positive direction, and not trying to backslide anywhere where we've been. So within that overall document, the table of contents, we've got reserves and fund balance policy, a cash management policy, a debt management policy, capital improvement plan, other general policies, and then investment policies. To kind of give you an overview, I'm going to jump around on the order on those a little bit. The investment policies, the other general policies, those are kind of high level. What the document overall drives to do is if a bond rating agency or auditors pick up this document, it's going to spell out the best practices. These are things that we do anyways, but it puts it in a formal policy to say that these are the things we're doing, that we're accountable for these items. For auditors or for any bond rating agencies or any debt issuances in the future, this will help with those. Same thing with the capital improvement plan. It says more or less how we're going to do it. These are the things we're going to do. It's currently what we're driving towards. It just formalizes those. Same thing with the cash management. The more specific policies, I would say, is probably the reserves and fund balance, and then the debt management policy. With those, there's two additional spreadsheets. One is the fund balance analysis. So at the top left corner, you'll see where it says fund balance analysis. What I did here is I took this policy, which is not passed yet. So if this policy were in place at June 30th, 2021, would we pass it? How do we look? So what this would do is it takes our overall fund balance of $23,852,000, and it would say of that unassigned balance, we would not necessarily set aside, but designate 16.7% towards fiscal stability and liquidity purposes. That's a problem the county has come from is cash flow issues. We want to make sure we don't get back to that point. So that sets aside that. So when, an auditor comes in to see what, how liquid your operations are, or from a bond rating agency, that's one of the key things they look at is how liquid you are. Are you going to have any short-term issues? So it sets that aside. Revenue stabilization, what that does is that sets aside 3% to say if there's any significant fluctuations from year to year in revenue. You throw out any myriad of hypothetical situations, significant decreases in tax basis or law changes or something that would dramatically change revenue. You still, at that moment, have those operations going. What that kind of set aside does is it would give you time to change what you need to change without significantly the next day having to come in and either cut services or significantly increase revenues. So it'll allow for a more time-based adjustment so that you're not all of a sudden having spikes in rates and things like that. And then at the bottom is the capital reserve / improvement, where that gives us the ability to do grant fundings, A lot of them are 80-20 matches. That gives us the ability to have that money there so that we can pursue those opportunities. So at year end, what that does is, total we would need have $18,847,000 set aside, which as of June 30th, 2021, we would meet that requirement. That would leave an unassigned fund balance for operations of $5 million. And then below, I'm an auditor at heart, so there's my check figures. I try to detail everything out. So that's how I came up with, per the policy, those balances of what those percentages are based on the county budget, the school budget, and pulling out the contribution from the county to the school so we don't duplicate anything. If you look at the other attachment, it's the historical fund balance analysis. It's the one document that has the line graph on it. What that does is that shows what the county's fund balance has been since 2011 to 2021. I've included the fund balance, the change in fund balance from the prior year, and as a note, I've included the years that the county issued a revenue anticipation note. And then the significant increases in 2020, that was related to when the county changed to the twice-year tax collections. And as we've had previous discussions before, what that does is that gives a one-time half year's collection boost to your fund balance and cash flows. And then last year, there was an increase of $6 million, and that was due to there were no funds spent on CIP in the prior year, which we've set aside that fund and created that fund this year with those funds so that we're able to pre-fund our CIP. And then suspension of operations just due to the COVID-19 and the cutbacks that were associated with that. So that's how we got that increase there. But what you can see is, really between years 2016 to 2019, the county hovered around $9 million. So currently on the other spreadsheet, the unassigned fund balance for operations is at $5 million. What that would mean is right now we'll have to operate out of that savings account, that $14 million that's sitting there. We'll have to operate. We'll have to be in that to continue with our operations. That $9 million is the mark where you don't have to have, you don't operate out of that savings, or in prior history you don't have the revenue anticipation notes. And what this policy overall and total really is trying to design to do is, you can see in 2012, the county was at 17 million, and it did not take long for it to go downhill and really bottom out there. So what it's really designed to do is just keep us from getting back to a point like that. So I threw a lot of numbers at you all. Do you have any specific questions on the fund balance piece of the overall policy?
And what this will also do is every year you will get a statement saying where you're at, if you match this policy or not. So you will know every year if we're in line with what the policy says. And it'll give you an idea of where we are at. I guess
the goal is a range, right? Percentage of operating money on reserve, or what exactly is it?
What exactly is the
I
range?
remember when the auditor was here last month, or the previous meeting, he talked about you want your fund balance to be within a certain percentage range.
Yes. It honestly kind of varies based on the locality. But for a given range, you want a minimum of 3 to 4 months expenditure. So it's usually in that kind of 20 to 30% range in there.
And where are we?
I think right now we're around that upper 30 part.
Okay. That's good.
Anybody else have any more questions? We don't have to adopt this yet. We could get time to look over it and, okay.
And then moving on to the debt piece of it.
We're gonna pass these down important.
Yes. Let's see. That is, so I had another spreadsheet there. It's got the green bars on it down at the bottom. It's the debt policy compliance test. Pulling out the pieces of the debt policy on here, this gives us a way to check and see, again, this is, auditors will look at this, and bond rating agencies will look at this too to see how leveraged the county is. Given industry and what's recommended out there, the debt policy has two key financial pieces for measurement. One is the debt as a percentage of the assessed values not to exceed 3%. And then debt service, which is your annual payment for the county and school board budget expenditures not to exceed 8%. So what I've done here is I've given ourselves a check to see, if this policy were in place at June 30th, would we pass? And then kind of towards the bottom of it, it's got the county debt compliance check. So of that 3%, that 3% of our assessed value would be $77 million, and the county is at almost even $20 million. So we definitely passed that piece of the test. And then the next is annual debt service, annual debt payments, limit of 8% of the total budgets. So you take the county budget and the school board budget less the contribution there. And the limit on that is 6.9 million, and right now we're at 4.8 million. So that includes the county and the school board debt. And then I went one step further to see if we included the PSA. Now, normally you do not include the PSA because they're on separate entity. But let's just see if we would pass it with including the PSA. What I did is I took the county for 2021 and the PSA for 2021, and we do pass both of those. The total debt on those is $42,700,000, and the total debt service payment is $5.4 million when including both. So when including both, we still do pass that.
But it wasn't too many years ago that we didn't pass it, correct?
And this gives us a way to, down the road, if the county looks at issuance of debt, we can check these things before we even are get too far down that road.
Absolutely. Anybody have any more questions for Justin or Mr. Watson? All right, we'll move on to board member comments. I'll start with Mr. Early.
I think I sent an email out to everybody saying I had a conflict with the District 3 meeting date and time and the Airport Commission. I was incorrect. I was given the wrong date for the Airport Commission. So I'm good to stay as the alternate.
Okay. All right.
That's really all I have to say. And, well, I do want to thank both of y'all for the amount of work you do. I mean, y'all are giving us excellent products to work with. I cannot tell you how much better it is now than it was the last time I was on the board in the early 2000s. Y'all are doing an excellent job. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Collins.
I got several as we're talking about being a budget work session. One of the things that we've talked a lot about is volunteers are gone. You don't have volunteers anymore, and short-staffed, and EMS short-staffed, and sheriff's office, everybody's short-staffed, from restaurants to convenience stores to every schools. They need teachers, they need substitutes, they need bus drivers, they need. I'd like for us to see how we can reinvigorate some of the volunteer stuff. I mean, I understand it's a different world that we live in. People don't have time to volunteer like they did back in Andy Griffith's day. I mean, that's when you didn't have everything under the sun to go and do. So I would like for us to look at how we could reinvigorate some of that, because I know in my district, when they did away with the volunteer EMS, in the way it was handled, it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. You know, another thing I'd like to look at, he was talking about substations. How many substations do we own or have leases on that are not being used? I know one was given back to somebody right across the road from where I live. It was a I don't know how many year lease, basically for nothing, that was given back. It's a perfectly good building, and now we're talking about obtaining other substations. So I wonder how many of those we have that could be put back into use. I would like for, and I'll talk to Gary about looking into the billing and how that works. You know, what's the possibility of doing that billing in-house in the county, doing it? Is it just so, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars they're billing a year. I don't know how much we're paying a billing company to do the billing. Could we employ a couple of people to do that billing and do it ourselves? That's just it's something I'd like to look at. I'd like for us to have some kind of a narrative understanding for our citizens to understand what they get for their tax dollars. You know, a lot of citizens seem to think that we pay taxes so that we have an EMS and a fire department, but then they're getting billed for those services. Let's help them understand how that works. You know, the thing I hear, and I'm sure you've heard it for years, what do we get for our, what is it we get for our taxes? I'd like to be able to tell the citizens this is what we get for the taxes that we pay. I'd love to see us get the clearinghouse website of some kind for the jobs that are available, because I think we could get more applicants if people could find them and know what was available. When it comes to budget, you know, there's an old saying that sometimes you got to spend money to make money. I would like to see us look at putting in the budget, having an assistant county administrator. I don't know how you do everything you do. I really do not. I mean, with the amount of emails that come across my desk every single day, I don't know how you do anything but put out fires, Mike. I appreciate the job that you're doing, but if we put money in the budget to have a bona fide assistant county administrator or a bona fide full-time economic development director, there's no way that one person can do everything that needs to be done. I want to see our county work from a concept of let's grow and let's excel, and not what can we do not to sink. That's what I want to see. When it comes to the training center property, boy, I had the same thoughts you had when you talked about the fairgrounds. You know, the recreation that could go on there. What are the possibilities of that being? You know, I know Surrey County did they took an old Lowe's building and turned it into their first responder gathering center. That's where they all work out of. You know, I could see our fire rescue, sheriff's department utilizing those buildings, office space, whatever. And then even including the rec department in that, and then opening up some very prime real estate to market to somebody that could come in and give us compound income year after year after year on a piece of a property there. But in light of that, the other thing I'd like to see us do is I'd like to see us have a sit down with Acadia Health. I don't know that this Board of Supervisors and Acadia Health has ever sat down at the table together. They're coming to Carroll County. They've got 20,000 employees. They're in 40 different states. They've got 230 locations. This company is absolutely huge. I think the Board of Supervisors need to say to Acadia Health, if you're coming to Carroll County, this is what we expect. We expect our citizens to be safe, and for them to be safe, we've got to come to an agreement of this is how they're going to be safe. Maybe we can help them understand they don't want to come here. Maybe they can help us understand how we'd love to have them here. I don't know what it is, but how can we, right now it's such an adversarial relationship. I cannot imagine having a multi-billion-dollar company moving into a community that does not want me, that does not like me, and would have the feeling that everything's going to be adversarial if we go there. So I'd like to see us invite Acadia Health to come and sit down with us and not just send somebody that doesn't know the details. I want people from that company that are going to be able to make some decisions because we've got to work together. If they're coming, we've got to work together. But it's very adversarial. I'd like to hear their plans. I'd like for them to tell us, you know, what they want to do. I'd like for us to be able to tell them what we expect. That's all I got. That was a lot. I'm sorry.
Mr. Hill?
So it's a good input. All good information. I agree with my counterparts to the right, especially like our financial information you give us. We've never had that in the past, and that's one of the reasons that I love having financial management policies. It gives us direction on what we can spend and what we shouldn't spend. Yeah, that's all I've got.
All right. Mr. McCurl?
Just like to thank Justin and Mike for their efforts for this financial policies and the work they've put forward with it. And it's been a long time coming for us. And we went through some really lean times. And I'm like what Jody said, it's a lot better now than it used to be. And I'm just going to beat a dead horse just a little bit more. Broadband, broadband, broadband. The people in this county are due something with broadband. So, thank y'all.
Mr. Dixon?
Well, I want to thank you, Mike and Justin, for your hard work on everything. Jason for staying and doing what you're doing. Do really want to know Gary and all the EMS workers, how much we do appreciate them, and especially the volunteers. It's a tough job. Thank you for what you do for us every day. We as a board have got to get the support needed to ensure our citizens are taken care of, and I think we're heading that direction. So whatever it takes to do that, I'm willing to do. On to a couple of things Ronnie said. I've always agreed with, billing in-house, looking at a hard billing and hiring someone to maybe do that, create a job as well. And I think there is a need for maybe a secretary, assistant county administrator, or something to take some of the work off of Mike as well. And since you brought the training center, it's a great place for the Fairgrounds, EMS, our rec department. I've got some issues with how that's handled. The county gave the land to the state, $180,000 to provide water and sewer. So we're not getting anything back out of this. Nobody to communicate. Our senators are not telling us anything. They're not doing their job. We've reached out to them. They're not answering anything. We don't know what's coming into our county. If there's no agreement that's been made and they can't find an agreement, then what gives the state the right to sell the land? So I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions we need to look into. I'm all for safety ordinance for this, for the training center, and so hopefully we can get something moving pretty soon on this and get some unanswered questions. That's all I've got.
No.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one more question?
Yes, sir.
Quickly before you make
Yes,
your
sir.
comments. Can we get rid of these things?
Yeah, whenever you want to. It's for your own protection.
Yeah,
We sit next to each other in that room back there, and we don't have that.
and you can't see the screens.
Yeah. I don't know what the PSA is going to think about it, but I'd like to see them gone.
That'd be fine, yeah.
That'd be fine with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have them taken out.
Thank you.
I'd like to ditto what everybody said, appreciate Justin, what you've done. About the only thing that's, I did speak with county attorney today, and he's going to come up with some things, and he really urged to reach out to our senators and all. He felt like, we need to continue to try to find out what is going on with the training center project. From what I've always been told, and I think Mike could elaborate, it's got to be used by the way the General Assembly passed the thing for certain things. Is that correct?
It was placed in the budget several years ago to be used for a for-profit health care purposes for a certain number of years. But I can send out some information on what I have and to see. I think there's an opportunity if Arcadia Health doesn't purchase this, I think there's an opportunity if we're able to.
But I think that's what we need to not only reach out to our senators and congressmen and stuff to try to get answers of why it hasn't closed, if it was going to close by now, where we are with that, and how they can get a bill in there to change it to where it's not limited to what it can be, and it can be more of a decision of the citizens of the county or a board, you know. But other than that, the only other thing is, and Jason might could help me on it, is the phone situation. You know, I think a lot of the people, I got a lot of phone calls and stuff about the phone issues, and I'm not sure if they're CenturyLink or who they are, but, you know, I think the Treasurer's Department had a rough time last week getting calls or busy or whatnot. And, you know, I know some of that stuff's on some of the CIP programs and stuff, and I think they should be top of their list. That way, you know, the citizens or the employees we do have work hard for their job, to represent the county, and they shouldn't come to work and have to deal with something that's not within their, you know, workload or RAM of have to deal with when it's nothing they can do to change a telephone system or a state ordinance or whatnot. But other than that, if there's nobody else got anything else, I'll entertain a motion for Mr. Hill.
I think we sent something to them.
We can just resend that to our delegate. That we
In an update, you know, more than anything, I think we need an update. You know, it's went on, you know, it's not closed for some reason. We should be able to be told that, you know. But anybody got anything else? You, Mr. Watson, you, all right. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Second? Do I hear a second? All right, I'll start the vote with Mr. Early. Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. McCraw?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon? Yes. And I vote yes. Thank you, gentlemen.